welcome. Carrie here from Healing Humanity, the power of a proper human diet, and thank you for joining us today. I am sorry, my computer's glitching on me. Okay, here we go. In today's live stream, we got a really interesting discussion lined up for you. We're asking the question, is everyone really quitting carnivore? And if you're new to this space, you might have seen a bunch of videos and posts lately suggesting that there's like some kind of mass exodus happening in the carnivore community. So we want to talk about, is that actually the truth, or is that just a bunch of clickbait? Over the past few weeks, we've seen some influencers talking about adding carbs back into their diet. And it can be confusing, especially for newcomers. I have a lot of new folks on my channel who are just discovering carnivore, and maybe they're trying it for serious health issues. So today we're going to dig into that, and I'm honored to have these three gentlemen on. Eddie, Lee, Adam, welcome. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. How about you, Carrie? Been a while since we've talked.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. I'm doing wonderful. I watch you guys on YouTube all the time, so I really appreciate you coming on. I just want to tell my audience, make sure you subscribe and follow each of these individuals. I have a link in the description below for each of their YouTube channels. They each bring a unique perspective to the carnivore world for sure. And so as we go through today's discussion, we're doing this live. We'd love to hear from you guys in the chat. So let us know where you're watching from. Drop your thoughts in. Have you added back carbs in at any point? Do you feel like everyone's quitting carnivore, that sort of thing? We'd love to hear from you in the chat. So maybe to kick off the discussion, we can talk about, is everyone really quitting carnivore? And maybe Eddie, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on this topic of, is everyone quitting carnivore?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, whenever I'm doing videos, the normal thing that I talk about in my videos is how a lot of things cannot be informed upon with a lot of conviction. So we have to be very careful with a claim that broad whenever it's made. And we have to look at the available evidence at the moment. The evidence at the moment is that there are some prominent influencers that it seems all at once, sort of in a cascade fashion, decided, hey, we're going to start introducing carbohydrates back in. And not only are they going to introduce carbohydrates back in, they went as far to say, this is the biggest problem, I think, which is that they said that carbohydrates themselves, or carnivore itself, is something that not only will not work, it's sort of on a time limit, but it'll actually cause metabolic dysfunction. Something that we know that there are, I mean, at this point, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of anecdotes, if not millions at this point, of people healing said syndrome or condition with. And so I think that's the line that I don't like being crossed. I mean, if anyone knows my story, I'm someone that at 16 years old I developed hypermobile EDS, developed symptoms of it, and it shot me down for years. It just shot me down multiple different rabbit holes in investigating diet, health, all things health, not just diet, but I put lots of emphasis on diet. And human nutrition science, or what is so-called science, and we might be able to get into that later. But as a result of that, I mean, that culminated into my book, and one of the things that I talk about in there, it's one of the primary things, is how carnivore is, from every inference we have, our species-appropriate, species-specific diet. And so does it make sense that a diet will cause metabolic dysfunction in millions of people? Does it make sense that it would be on a time limit? I'm not saying you can't have problems with it. And I'm not saying that you can't introduce carbohydrates if you want. I mean, everyone can do what they'd like. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm going to bar you from speaking with me or anything like that if you decide to do that. But it's just something that, even if you can do well at 90% of the ideal, does that mean that you should make the 90% of the ideal the new ideal? Does it mean you should shift the goalpost? I think this is really what the conversation is this is really what the controversy and the contention is, that at least I have. I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it as the conversation moves forward, though. So
yeah, I love your take on it. That's my thing too. I don't care what anyone eats, like, do whatever you want. However, there's a lot of new people that are watching this that are really confused, and they're doing this for major health reasons, and it can be very confusing when you see someone eating meat and fruit, for example, and maybe I'll just do that approach, and they end up ultimately failing. So I hate to see that. That's the reason I'm kind of careful about my messaging on my channel. People always get mad at me. Oh, Mr. Perfect, you're so strict. And it's like, do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm just trying to look out for the average person out there. I also feel like too, there's a bit of bias going on, or I don't know if bias is the right word, but when you have one or two influential people online making some changes, that often gets turned into that person's now quitting when they're not. They're making like a modification, gets turned into everybody's quitting carnivore like it's the end of the world. And it's like, really? Like, name 10 people that are quitting then. You can't even name 10 people, let alone everyone. But I don't know. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I really want to start by saying a little bit of what Eddie and you've even alluded to. What you choose to do in terms of inputs, dietary, lifestyle-wise, that's your business. You know, we're not here to be zealots. We're not here to say that you were never carnivore. I believe we're really inclusive, and this whole discussion is about trying to help people appropriately problem solve any potential issues that may have arisen. Maybe you had great success and you've been doing this for a year and a half, and now all of a sudden you're having problems initiating sleep. Maybe you're having your eyelids twitching, you're getting some fatigue and you're getting some cramps or whatever, right? You might be worried about your elevated HbA1c. It's creeping up and you think, oh my goodness, I have to abandon the diet. I should probably introduce carbohydrates, etc. The whole point of this discussion is to be very open and to hopefully arm people with tricks and tips to appropriately problem solve their diet so that they don't have to add what I believe is contraindicated carbohydrates. These will glycate tissues. And for many people that have come away from a mixed diet with carbohydrates, they realize they had a sugar addiction. I'm one of those people. And I think that it's a very, very dangerous, slippery slope for people to look at an influencer, for example. It's nothing against them. You can do what you want, right? If they see these people doing that, it's almost like an excuse to add carbohydrates back. And for many people, they can't add 20 grams of carbohydrates. 20 grams means a whole tub of ice cream and a donut afterwards. They didn't intend to do that. But, you know, I could probably mitigate some anxiety by doing some class A drugs, but is that the right problem solver? Or should I perhaps look at what I'm doing currently and say, well, look, this is inappropriate. That's inappropriate. This may be the issue. Let's taper back on that. Let's do an experiment, one thing at a time, then see what your results are. And then you might be able to say, well, look, actually, that's great. I'm free again. I don't need to, try and moderate carbohydrates, which is so difficult. I struggle to moderate milk. So the idea of adding back in sourdough bread, some roots and tubers, because it's ancestrally appropriate, ancestrally consistent, we have to realize that many of these carbohydrates are lower in fibrous material. Not that I'm a fan of fiber. I think everybody knows that. But they're much higher in carbohydrates. And that is a nightmare, especially if you're eating fats and carbohydrates, when they're paired with a bit of salt. I'm telling you, that is very, very dangerous for a lot of people. So we're here to help. We are here. If you're still watching, the chances are you're interested. I don't care what you're eating. You're probably in the right place. So hopefully we'll have a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, I love that you brought up addiction too. That's the other reason I'm careful with my messaging when I'm on YouTube, because I believe that the majority of people that are suffering and having issues, it's because of addiction. You look around, 9 out of 10 people have poor metabolic health. It's not because they're choosing to, it's in most part because we're addicted. And so we should be careful with our messaging and speak to those people. And like I said, I get a lot of new people on my YouTube channel, and they'll see like Paul Saladino, for example. Oh, he's doing fruit and meat. I'm going to try that. And it's like, okay, that would not have worked for me because I'm addicted, and a little bit of fruit would have led to a lot more sort of down the road. So I think addiction is a huge part of it. Adam, what are your thoughts on all this and people quitting carnivore?
I definitely appreciate Eddie and Lee's take on this and your take on this. I think I would really want to define what carnivore actually is, right? Like, we need to understand what it actually is for most people. And it seems like the definition is somewhat a little out there as far as what you actually include on a carnivore diet. If you're a hyper carnivore, if you're a carnivore, ketovore, and all these crazy terms that are out there. So, first we need to define what carnivore actually is before we determine if somebody is not a carnivore anymore, right? And I agree with you guys. I think a lot of this stuff is being popularized now. Maybe these people were having problems along the way, and they just now decided to start creating content because the first domino fell. we really don't know if it's that or they have good reasons for coming out with that content to try to help people, or if it's just for clickbait. I really don't know. But I do know that it seems like some that have been doing this for a while and have been leading people down a certain path, that eating only meat is the way to go. It is a proper human diet. They probably have more of a special responsibility to take care of the message that they're putting out there and be careful with that. So, yeah, I think we just need to define what carnivore is. And really, that's sort of subjective, really. To be honest with you, I don't think there's any hard and fast rule on exactly what that is.
Do you mind if I just cut in? I really like
Sure.
what you said that, Adam, actually. That's true, because immediately you said that, what I pictured is someone eating a hyper-carnivore diet. Let's just say between 70 and 80% meat every day. But 20 to 30% of that my diet, right? I eat tobacco leaves. I just eat tobacco leaves, I love tobacco leaves. That's a hyper-carnivore diet right there. But it matters what you make up this remaining percentage. And I think that a lot of people can attest to this. They've been 95% carnivore. They have coffee. They may have some pepper on their steak, right? I call that about 95% carnivore. They take out the coffee. They take out the pepper. All their problems are gone. So it depends on who you are. And I think that a lot of people obviously are aware that carnivore, I would say this, a carnivore diet by Sean Baker's definition is a diet that consists exclusively of animal products. Eddie has alluded to this. That could be nothing but raw milk and beef jerky. Terrible way to go. Terrible way to go. If you're going, well, I went carnivore, I tried the carnivore diet. That's not the carnivore diet. There is no the carnivore diet, because every single one of our plates is different. And so if you look at my plate, it's going to be different to Eddie's plate, it's going to be different to Kerry's, so on and so forth. Now, some people do have a very small requirement for dairy if they have pastoral genes. If you get a racy heartbeat, add a little bit of dairy and that usually goes away. But does that mean that all carnivore diets should have dairy represented? I think it's the contrary. I think for about 75% of people, any dairy present in the diet can be the be-all and end-all of your problems in terms of addiction, in terms of calcium and electrolyte balance. If you're autoimmune, the casein protein, even in ghee, has shown to actually cause problems in people that are very sensitive. So for those people, zero dairy. And so again, I love the fact that you point that out, Adam. What is a carnivore diet? Well, depends on who you are. How long is a piece of string? So if you have autoimmune, it should be animal products, no plants, no dairy, right? That's my opinion. If you're really serious about, reversing your autoimmune disease, sealing that gut, that's really the necessary steps you need to take. I wouldn't consume coffee. Now, if you are less sensitive to dairy and you do feel like a little bit better with dairy, you use it as a condiment or like a very small dessert, or you pepper in some Parmesan cheese, that's fine. But a lot of people, they wake up in the morning and they go, right, I need a coffee and I'm going to put butter in that. I can tell you for a fact that anyone from 15,000 years before that never, ever, ever did that. Ever.
Right. Yeah.
So if we're going to talk about ancestrally appropriate, ancestrally consistent, you've just failed immediately. And I'm not talking like a zealot here. You do whatever you want. Seriously, if you want to go and set yourself on fire after you've eaten your breakfast, I'm not going to stop you. Okay? Do what you want. But if you are going, well, I've got cramps, I've got autoimmune problems, I feel fatigued, I can't initiate sleep, I'm struggling to not have cravings, maybe dairy's a problem, maybe caffeine's a problem, and I'm sure we can get into this in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. No, I mean that's exactly what I was going to get at, because that's been one of my biggest points of contention in my videos as well. Because I'll talk about, well, what do you mean by carnivore? What do you mean by the carnivore diet? Like, they act like it's one thing, because whenever anyone disparages the carnivore diet, they're disparaging all different variations of carnivore for every single type of person with every single type of background. There's so many. You want to talk about actual dogma? It's that. Now everyone wants to talk about, whether if you say something that's true, like this table in front of me exists, that's dogmatic, because any claim that deviates away from that truth is false. Is considered false. That's not what dogma is. That's not what dogma is. Dogma is rejecting any sort of nuance regarding the truth that can help contextualize it, that helps, make it make more sense to people. And that is something that I think is seen a lot. I wanted to get back to a previous point. Carrie, I think you're right. And I never said anything other than this. I think you're right that it's a select few people at the top that are very influential that are actually shifting their diet, if they are at all. A lot of them, they're saying, oh, well, I'm introducing like a few, you know, just like a food here or there or something like that has some carbs in it. And people will say, well, clickbait title would be, okay, well, I'm quitting carnivore, right? I'm quitting carnivore. And it's like, again, that depends on what you mean by carnivore. And I think we've already covered that. But I think still the reason I wanted to have this conversation, and I think that it's productive to have this conversation, is because as much as it is a select few people, if they're at the very top and they're having a large influence over other people, who's to say how many people actually have changed their diets that we aren't aware of? Some of these people are doing completely fine, but now they're being scared into, oh, maybe I'm going to have problems 5 years from now. Like maybe I'm going to have problems next week if I keep doing this. Let me go get my blood test done. And then that leads into another discussion. I think a big reason why people are deviating and introducing carbs back in is because they're reading blood tests out of context. I think, Carrie, you just mentioned like I think you mentioned an A1C value or something like that. Fasting blood glucose, A1C, they all have to be contextualized. We've seen that over the past like few years now. In recent years, to be fair, because people have, it's become more salient of an issue to be investigated in further detail to help contextualize those values. But after we've done that, we've realized, oh, so just because you might have a higher fasting blood glucose, that doesn't mean that I'm suffering from more glycation. That's interesting. Oh, just because I have a higher HbA1c value, that doesn't mean that I'm becoming diabetic. There's a little more nuance involved there. Am I spiking all the time and troughing multiple times a day, or am I just exhibiting a higher fasting blood glucose? And having my fructosamine assay, something that actually does measure glycation rate of like things like albumin, having it be stone cold, completely like zero, like basically no minimal change. And if anything, if the change is present, then it's in a downward direction. So, like all these things need to be contextualized. And I think a big problem that I'm seeing cited as a problem in this regard is thyroid function. People could be having a completely fine metabolic rate, but if their T3 goes down just a little bit, they look at the number and it scares them. And I think what we're seeing is now that people are starting to bring it up more, these very prevalent carnivore influencers, even if it is a select few, a handful, you're seeing people go, oh, I don't have any problems, but what if I actually do and I'm just not feeling them? Let me go get blood tests done. And then, oh, it matches what they're saying. So therefore I must deviate. I must have fruit in my diet. It's like, well, I find myself asking the question all the time, like, according to whom and on what basis? Like, oh, your HbA1c value is going too high. Well, what do you mean too high? According to what basis? What is the context here? What is the reason? I think that's the biggest reason that I'm having this discussion, because I think that there are many people that are, like you said, Carrie, they're confused now. They're entirely confused, and now they think that, well, we should just, you know what? This is an extreme diet. This is technically an extreme because it's a stark deviation away from the norm. So therefore, just to be safe, I'll find a middle ground here. I'll start introducing some carbs back in. And then what happens is they don't introduce some, they introduce a ton.
Eddie, if you just add a box of like Oreo cookies and a tomato, it's not extreme.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Extreme means bad always. No, extreme just means a deviation away from the norm. Now look what norm is. Look what normal is. Like that's really what it means. So it's just it's another fear mongering term. But I can tell you right now, I remember there was one influencer, and just in case she doesn't want me to say it, I won't name names. But she decided, she got to her best, most aesthetically pleasing weight in her opinion. Okay, on carnivore. It took her a while to get to that point. She actually features in my book, by the way, in the anecdote chapter, because her story was great, and she suffers from carbohydrate addiction very clearly. And she bought into this months before this recent, controversy came up. And she was like, okay, well, maybe I'll have some. Well, some was not some. I guess it depends on how you define that too, because she had a lot, and she gained 20 pounds back very quickly. And she has not reached her weight that she got to, that she was very proud of months ago. She hasn't reached that since. She's still struggling to get back to that point. She realized how much of a mistake that was. We collectively are trying to avoid that. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
100%. That's one big thing. I have heard that story over and over and over again. People get down to their goal, and then they're like, well, I'll just go back to a little bit of moderation, or I'll just do a little bit of keto. And every single time it derails them. And it's not uncommon to hear, like, it derailed me for a year, and I tried to get back on carnivore, and that addiction was so strong, it was so hard to overcome it. And it's not just like a vanity thing in many cases too. It's, yeah, I gained weight back, but maybe their diabetes is coming back, or whatever ailment or issue they got over is now coming back. So it's a really serious thing. I just wanted to touch on one other thing from earlier. The thing that worries me as well is, I get this comment all the time, and I don't know if you guys do on your YouTube channels, but people tell me exactly what you're doing. Tell me what you ate yesterday precisely, like down to, I want to know the exact macros, the calories, exactly the ratios of everything you ate. And I always try to squash that and say, you shouldn't be worried about what some dude on YouTube is eating. Because like what I'm eating now on Carnivore, I'm almost 1,000 days into it. It's completely different than what I ate on week 1, maybe even month 1. It's completely different than maybe what Eddie's eating right now. So it's like, it's good to see like some influential people on YouTube and get inspired by them. But I really think the core message should be, they fix their metabolic health. What do I have to do to fix my metabolic health? It's not eat precisely the exact same recipes and ratios that person ate.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that gets into a conversation of like order and chaos. You need some functional order, so you need some sort of guidance as to what the best the best broad approximation to what we probably ought to be doing as a species. But it doesn't mean that there's no variation at all to be had within that sort of area. So carnivore is people would say, well, that's strict because you're siloing it off from all of the other types of diets that there are, right? And they call you dogmatic as a result of that. I think what would actually be dogmatic, because again, we have to be careful what dogma actually is. I mean, from every hard inference we have, I spent years looking at that myself, trying to look like, okay, well, human nutrition science is complete nonsense. At the end of the day, you can't actually perform true experimental science that shows any results of any utility on human beings. Even the observations that are done, even if you're just going to resort to observations, are really, really, really noisy. And they also contradict each other. Like, and then the next study done on the same topic can contradict the other one, which is why 10,000 of them are redacted from journals like every year, because they can't even be reproduced in terms of the results. You start deviating away from that, you go, okay, well, let's look at these. Let's outsource our inferences and our investigation. And whenever you look at that, you look at like chemical anthropology. You look at, I mean, Lee can attest to this. You just already mentioned this, Lee. Fiber. How do human beings actually deal with fiber and contend with it? Do we do well with that? I don't think so. And on the extreme ends of the spectrum, you might end up losing your colon. So we don't want that to happen to people either, and to have IBS and Crohn's disease and all this stuff. I think that it's one thing, therefore, as a result of all of this, looking at these hard inferences, saying, okay, well, this is the general appropriate way to eat, which would explain why millions of people they're not just healing like diabetes and heart disease. They're healing things that are looked at as completely irreversible, like completely anomalous conditions. And I don't think that's any coincidence. I don't think it's any coincidence at all. It's one thing to say that, though, and it's another thing to say that every single person has to eat the same carnivore way. Like there's everything has to be exactly the same. That is transgressing into a realm of too much order. Okay, that's not functional at all. Okay, that is not appropriate. You need some variation. You need some play there involved. I know I'm sort of sounding like Jordan Peterson here because he talks a lot about this. But it's true. Like you need some deviation away from that is appropriate so that people actually can make it sustainable. Like, does everyone have to eat the lion diet? Even then, the lion diet, there's different cuts of meat that you could have. You cook them a different way. Even then, there's some variation there. And that is where we need to be careful with being dogmatic. And I do see that a lot of times in the carnivore space. Like all dairy is bad no matter what for every single person. It's like, well, hold on a minute. I wouldn't go that far. Like what if like a tiny bit of dairy is what it keeps people going, like staying carnivore for years on end? You know what I mean? Like that needs to be considered still. And so, but the one thing that I will always push back on, I've said it like 4 times now, is the idea that, well, you should always be inclusive of like every single diet, like every single behavior. It's like, I understand the desire for that. I understand that. I'm not pretending otherwise, but you wouldn't moderate like every single behavior that way. You wouldn't like say, well, I've stayed loyal to my wife for the last month. So you know what, this week I'm just going to go crazy. I'm going to commit adultery. Like, no. There's some things that, you have free will to do that, but it's not appropriate to do that.
You've been
You
good.
deserve it. Yes, treat yourself.
Treat.
You know?
It's Saturday. Come on.
Yeah.
I
So
was just
so
thinking.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking. Maybe we could go and sort of like between us list a few of the most common issues that people experience, either in terms of not being able to problem solve in the beginning, initial periods of going carnivore, say 3 months down the line, they're like, this thing's still lingering, or maybe they've been carnivore for a year and a half, 2 years, maybe more, and they're saying they're having these problems. So perhaps if we can think about some issues, and then we could maybe try and sort of apply some nuanced thinking as to how to problem solve that issue for those people, so they can take something home and they're equipped, with the necessary steps at least to try and experiment before they add carbohydrates. And so, at the top of my head, I'm thinking muscle cramps, and again, like elevated HbA1c, tanked T3, testosterone, all these things that, you ask this person, how do you feel? They say, I feel fantastic. Then you show them a number, right? And then they go, oh, I don't know if I feel fantastic. Maybe I should probably, and Ed, who's the bodybuilder? Eddie, what's his name?
Eddie Abu.
No, the strongest.
Oh,
man.
Eddie Hall. Eddie Hall. Yes, yes.
That video in real time. He felt great. His strength is up. His recovery's up. He feels amazing. Life is just as good as it gets. Then you've got this so-called expert that doesn't look like he's in great shape. He's now breaking down all these bloods, and he's saying, "Oh, well, look, this," and he's like, "Oh," and you watch Eddie just cave slowly but surely, and all of a sudden he's like, "I need to." Bring in some variety. I need to get the antioxidants back in my diet because they weren't present, etc. And it's kind of like re-brain rushing this individual. So I don't know whether you want to sort of list any things that you feel like is a very common problem that people sort of bring up in terms of, on their carnivore journey, etc. What have you come across?
Yeah, well, I mean, I could first of all, before I even get into that, Carrie, you have dealt with, I'm sure that you receive a lot of comments, and you've also talked to people directly that have been on carnivore. So you can also attest to, you can tell us as well. I'll get into this, answer Lee's question, but you can tell me if you've also seen the same thing, because I'm curious to know. Because I mean, I'm confident that you probably have at least once or twice heard someone or come across someone that has said something like this or these things about carnivore and their experience on it. But yes, to your question, Lee, what I want to say before I even ask it is, it's important to recognize and not to casually just dismiss it and not really emphasize it all. The problems that I see, the problems that you see, the problems that everyone hears, like anecdotally that they encounter on carnivore, it's usually the same one or two. And I'm not saying that those problems are a good thing. Therefore, what I'm saying is that is not something to casually ignore, because if the diet were extremely bad, wouldn't you expect it to cause a slew of issues, like a ton of them? For like a year or 2 years, 5 years later down the line, you're seeing like the same one or two. So again, not to mitigate or not to minimize the significance of those problems, but that is not something to casually ignore. It's not something that I think that we should just take for granted. But with that said, those two problems that I'll see two of them I'm gonna lump into one because they're basically the same thing. It's weight loss stalling or maybe potential weight gain. Okay, and before I even get into some speculations as to what I think is causing that, I've had a few conversations with coaches so far, even just last week, about this to get their take on it based on their clientele or their client base. But the other problem that I see, you already mentioned it, it's the thyroid function and anything that pertains to that, which seems to be undergirded by insulin, and basically metabolic rate. So like you said, electrolyte disturbances, poor sleep quality, cold temperatures, not able to build as much muscle and or maintain the muscle that you already have. Sometimes people are seeing problems with that. I think that there's a few culprits here. Number one, when it comes to weight loss and weight stalling, it could either be the extremes on both ends of the spectrum. Undereating, ironically, yes, it sounds paradoxical, but poor metabolic rate. Well, a lot of mass has to come from somewhere, and the way that the body allocates mass is a lot of times dependent on your metabolic rate and your hormones. And in fact, that's the overarching mechanism there. So if you're not, I hate to use the normie sort of false models here, but for the sake of simplicity and brevity, I'll say if you're not burning a lot of what you're eating or as much of what you're eating because your metabolic rate is low, you're going to be storing more of it. That's because mass again has to come from somewhere. But also it could be the extreme, which is overeating. And I think that a big problem, a big culprit when it comes to overeating is going to be if you're not having carbohydrates and sweeteners, which, I mean, make sure you're not doing that because that can very easily cause you to overeat, even if it's not sweet, oddly enough. It's by putting a lot of dairy on your food. Like the way to overeat fat and protein for me, like to actually overeat it beyond what I know I need, is to put like a few tablespoons of cream cheese in my bowl of ground beef. Oh boy, then I can eat 2 pounds, 3 pounds maybe if you know, like I know for a fact that that's what that does to me. And so if people are overeating, well, same thing there. Same thing there. I think that those two things are the culprits there. And then when it comes to thyroid function, I think that's mainly undereating. A lot of times people can undereat. And this is something that sounds completely odd, but after I said it one time in passing, I had a bunch of people tell me, oh, I didn't, you know, I thought something about that, but I never realized like, oh, you're having the same problem. Maybe other people are too.
Right.
I can eat double the amount of protein in one meal if I'm not eating it in the form of ground beef. So a lot of times people might be undereating protein, I think. It seems. Ground beef, for me, minced meat, I can eat like half of the amount of food that I would be able to eat if I just had a steak or something. I had the meat in the form of a steak. And so that's something else that people could consider because, I mean, I was thinking, I was like, well, according to the ancestral consistency model that we follow, when we killed an animal, did we take every single part of the animal all at once and grind it up in a machine and a grinder and then cook that and then eat the bowl? No, it's not to say that it's not appropriate to eat ground beef. Like I eat, that's actually mainly what I eat, by the way. But it's to say that if you are having problems ostensibly with undereating, then it might be because you're not able to eat as much because you're hindering the ability for you to eat as much with eating things like ground beef or something like that. It does fit within that model. Again, it sounds odd. It sounds a little irrelevant and tangential. But when we talk about undereating, there could be very, very, very hidden, inconspicuous culprits like that as one example. And I think that that's actually, those are the biggest problems that people might have on carnivore. So many people completely fail to understand how little that they actually will be able to eat to reach satiety when they start carnivore. Another anecdote, the ex-plant eater, maybe some people have heard of her, Josie Leader. She featured in my book as well and she said the same exact thing. She said, oh, well, before I went carnivore, I was completely convinced that I wouldn't be able to do it because I was going to eat like she said that she was actually going to eat she thought she was going to get fat on carnivore because of how much she ate on her plant-based diet. She's like, man, if I ate that much meat, I'm going to get, but no, she was eating very small portions and feeling completely satisfied. But there could be a transgression, a trending towards the opposite end of the spectrum or to the extreme end of that spectrum, which is perhaps even under eating beyond what is required, especially if you've been nutritionally deficient for years because you've been on a plant-based diet or something like that. But that's my take on that. But Carrie, have you heard of people saying things like this? I think that, you know, when it comes to thyroid function and the weight gain and the weight stalling, have you come across people that have said things like that? And also, if you have, do you know of ways that they fixed it? Maybe you or members of your family. I don't know. I mean, you've been carnivore for a while. Maybe you have had some of those hurdles before. I'm curious to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of the most popular messages I get when someone's troubleshooting or having issues with carnivore. And it's usually stalling out or gaining a little bit of weight. And usually in most cases, from what I've learned, it's often exactly what you said, Eddie. It's usually too much dairy. That's one big thing. The other thing is I often hear from people that, you know, this was the case for me, and I think many people, when you're losing a bunch of weight, I'm down 100 pounds since my heaviest. Well, the first 15 pounds were a heck of a lot easier than the last 15 pounds. And I hear from a lot of people that are struggling with that last 15 pounds, and it's hard for everybody. I still got like belly fat around my belly, and I'm fine with it because I'm metabolically healthy. I'm like, right. God forbid if I get cancer or there's some famine or something, like I got a little fuel in the tank if I've got to fast a little. I'm like happy with it because I know I'm metabolically healthy. But I think a lot of people have unrealistic expectations and they've got an extra 15 like vanity pounds to lose and they just freak out and they panic like, what do I have to do to get this last little bit out, which I think can be dangerous. And the only other thing that's kind of strikes me as weird is not naming any names, but when there's been a couple people like longer term doing carnivore, like 15 years or 10 years, and it's like smooth sailing that whole entire time. And now suddenly it's not working anymore. That just doesn't jive with me. And it
So
just
glad you
makes
brought
me,
that up. Yes.
yeah, it just makes me think like, could it be something else? Like, for example, stress or some other factor, or maybe it's the diet, or maybe it's just, it doesn't make sense that you're doing the same thing for 10 or 15 years, absolutely thriving, and then suddenly it's just not working anymore. I just can't reconcile that in my brain.
I saw someone that was doing this for 20 years. By their own admission, 20 years they were doing this, and they're like, they are fit. They're very, very, very fit, and not fit in the unhealthy bodybuilder sense, trying to get as big as possible and as lean as possible. Like, no, like very, very healthily fit. And within the last 2 years, apparently, they decided to, and again, this is another point. It's not just introducing and changing a food here and there. They're introducing a little something. I mean, now this person is saying that you should be eating hundreds of grams of carbohydrates, like hundreds a day. And in fact, not only that, but to go low fat in order to compensate for that, because, if you eat the fat and carbs together, they recognize that you're probably not going to do too well. So it's not even just 10 or 15 years. I mean, we're 20 years, which is another reason why it was so significant. It was such a significant point. Even if it was just a few influencers, the influencers are like, they're long-term influencers. They carry a lot more influence because they've been the long-term ones. And now they're saying, well, because of this one person or this other, this blood test or something else, like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Or yes, like you said, Carrie, they developed a problem or something, and it's been bugging them for a few months, maybe even a year. And now it's like, carnivore has run its course. It's like, I feel like you're taking for granted everything that it's done for you for like the last decade and a half, 2 decades, maybe, and what you've been able to achieve with that diet, and only that diet in your experience. Like it's something that you can't just, that's typically what happens. The better you get, you already mentioned it. You start to be like, all right, well, now I could do that thing again and I'll be fine. It's like, no, be careful with that. I did that for a year and a half, for my first year and a half, probably a year and 3/4. I was strict carnivore, like no carbs, none. And I did fine. And then it was Christmas time, and I came back home with family, and I went, let's test my luck here. I'm sure I can get away with this. And it's not like I didn't get away with it. Like, obviously, yes, I looked the same. I felt generally the same. But the reason I stopped after less than a month was because as much as I felt generally the same, I still didn't feel too good. Not as good as I did whenever I was on carnivore. And I kept imagining, like strict carnivore. And I kept imagining, I kept thinking, I was like, man, if I did this for like another month or another 2 months, like, I don't know if I'd be able to go back as easily as I'm able to go back now, because of the addiction mindset. Like, I don't know whether you'd call me an addict now that I'm not having carbohydrates every single day in large quantities or anything like that. Or if you say, like, I don't know if that makes me still an addict, that I have a desire to eat them when they're in front of me. A lot of times people have, for a while, I didn't have the desire even when they were in front of me. And then it was like that one Christmas, man, it's like, now I have to make sure it's not in front of me. I don't binge whenever it's in front of me, but it's like, so I don't know if you'd call that an addiction, because it's not like, if I don't have them, I'm like having withdrawals and like scratching my arm, I'm not doing any of that, but I have the addictive mindset. And so I think, yes, it's very important, especially for the carbohydrate addicted people that are coming to this diet, that have healed diabetes, heart disease, or at least are having a very apparent, very patent regression of their heart disease, to curtail the shallow reasoning behind doing this. Again, not being dogmatic, do what you'd like. But if you're going to talk about introducing hundreds of grams, especially a day, you got to have some more substantial reasoning, I think. Than what's being offered. So,
right. I want to ask Adam a question, but first, I just want to say one last thing. What Eddie was saying earlier, you're right. Like, some of these influential people, they have a lot of influence, so it reaches a lot of people. So it's dangerous that way. I just want to encourage people that are watching, though, like we were talking about before, just realize that because they're influential, it gets blown out of proportion more than it should.
Yes.
This is the trouble I have reconciling things with is, we're working on the documentary, Healing Humanity. We're also working on a book. And in the book, we're collecting testimonies from people So I've just been going through this book over the last 2 or 3 weeks when all this buzz is going around about people quitting carnivore. And I'm literally reading tens of thousands of stories of people absolutely thriving on carnivore. People that have been doing carnivore for years, in some cases over a decade, and just thriving. So I have all that in my head, and then it's like 2 people slightly made a modification, and everyone's freaking out. It's just it's
Can
hard
I just
to not
say?
put it in
Can I just
perspective.
say though, what I've observed, at least 50% of these people that have, you know, they haven't abandoned the diet. They're still hyper carnivorous. They've introduced some carbohydrate of some kind, right? They all said, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel great, but I looked at a number and that changed.
Yes.
Think about how I feel, and now I've then changed the way I act. So again, I want to give a big shout out to Coach Stephen Thomas. If you don't know who that is, please go over and type Coach Stephen Thomas or the UK Carnivore into YouTube, into Google. You will find him. He is the guy that you want to go and watch his videos, binge his content. If you are concerned about what you see when you get your bloods taken, those numbers, they are numbers, right? These are normative ranges based on average people that consume between 45 and 65% carbohydrates. Now, most likely, if you're watching this, that is not you. So there is nuance that we need to understand to be able to properly and appropriately interpret these levels, because you shouldn't be chasing normative ranges. That's no goal of that. Should not be your goal. You know, a lot of people enter the hospital that year, they take their bloods and go, oh, look, we'll average this out. This is what we should strive for. I mean, no way, absolutely not. We are a demographic of our own. If we're reducing carbohydrates immensely, then the bloods won't look the same. Okay, so a lot of people see HbA1c creeping up. This is because our red blood cells are healthier, they are living longer. There's just a higher chance that they become glycated. It is a false reading that is also an estimated level, by the way. Get a fructosamine test, an HbA1c test that factors in the life of the red blood cell. This so-called tanked T3, right? When you're in glycolysis, okay, and I'm going to sound a lot like Coach Stephen, but I'm bigging him up, basically. If you want to learn more about this, go and check Coach Stephen out. Basically, when you're in glycolysis, okay, you're consuming so many carbohydrates that you're not going to be utilizing fat for fuel, okay? We're not burning anything, we're oxidizing fatty acids, or we are oxidizing pyruvate, right, Eddie, not glucose?
Yes, correct.
And, basically, when we're in glycolysis, what we need more T3 to do is to move pyruvate across the mitochondrial membrane in order to basically make acetyl-CoA units, right?
Yes.
If we're not in glycolysis, the T3 demand drops immediately. So you're going to look at a number and go, that's low. My thyroid has tanked. No, it hasn't. How do you feel? Well, I feel great. How do you look? Feel great. How do you sleep? Feel great. Everything's great. But hey, I looked at this number and now I need to abandon the diet. Absolutely not. There is nuance. And so if you want to understand this nuance around HbA1c, T3, testosterone, etc., you name it, go and visit Coach Stephen, because he will be able to help you with that. But there's a couple of other things I want to bring up before we close. Something I call comedy carbs. Okay, so it's much like mock meats. Okay, again, nothing against anyone. If you want to eat vegan steak, you go ahead and you do it. It's no skin off my back. But how vegans, you know, they have these mock meats, vegan steaks, vegan hot dogs, etc. I kind of laugh at that, you know, and look, nothing, again, I can't emphasize enough. You do what you want to do. But if you are on a carnivore diet and you're making carnivore pizza, carnivore chocolate, carnivore donuts, are we children or are we adults? Okay, I think that there is a place for all of this stuff. Carnivore chicken nuggets sounds like a child's dish. All right. When I'm on a carnivore diet, I don't make carnivore pizza. I don't take egg yolks, which is not a whole food. I don't take cream, which is not a whole food. I don't mix these together, destroy it in an oven, and then try and eat the way I used to eat because I'm trying to justify my addiction. That will not help you. Okay. The calcium, etc., the cheese, the casomorphins, this slight bit of sugar will not help you if you're trying to moderate a proper human diet, you know. And so there's so much nuance. I mean, I could talk for a long time about this, but I think that if you're consuming, again, I just want to bring this up. This kind of offends some people, but I think it's worth noting because this really may help you. If you're somebody that's consuming dairy every day, if you're someone that's consuming eggs in abundance every single day, you are consuming a heck of a lot of calcium. Calcium is antagonistic with magnesium. And when we look at blood, when we look at ruminant animals, etc., they're about 1-to-1, right? The moment the calcium creeps up, it's not about the total amount. It's about the ratios. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you add too much sodium to your diet, salt to taste, right? Well, I know people that sugar their teas to taste, and they have to have 5 sugars in that tea. Give it a month of having sugar-free teas. Guess what happens when I add just 1 tea? It's disgusting. So is it really just as simple as salt to taste? Not really. Sodium depletes potassium. When you deplete potassium, it throws all your electrolytes out of balance. You have diarrhea, constipation, sleep problems, insomnia, right? You can have cramp problems, eye twitches. It goes on and on and on. So did we have coffee first thing in the morning and add dairy? Coffee is a diuretic. It's going to excrete more electrolytes in your body. Why would you want to do that if electrolytes seem to look low on a carnivore diet? And then you're adding loads of salt, that depletes potassium. Then you're having loads of eggs and dairy, that depletes magnesium. Oh, I'm getting twitches. I'm getting eye spasms. My legs cramp up and it's really horrible. I should add some carbs, right? No, cut back on coffee, cut back on dairy. Then just one thing at a time, right? Coffee for 3 weeks. How do you do? If you still have problems, then dairy for 3 weeks. How are you doing? If you still have problems, cut back on those eggs. You might find that is everything solved for you. This is the thing. People don't understand that they're too quick to add a potato instead of taking away the coffee. They're too quick to add some sourdough bread and some sauerkraut and some apple cider vinegar and pepper before removing so many eggs. And for some people with autoimmunity, they cannot afford to have eggs and dairy, cannot afford to have, apart from anything else, you've got to think about caffeine. Not only is a diuretic, but you're going to have acrylamide. And even in decaf coffee, there is acrylamide present. It's a neurotoxin that's produced during the roasting process. So all of these things can have a nuanced effect on an individual. And I would just implore you, if you do believe, and this is like, I think everyone, I can speak for everyone here on screen right now, we believe this is the most appropriate way to go. The idea of introducing carbohydrates doesn't necessarily scare us unless you're a carb addict. And I mean, I'm one of them for sure. But I think there are tweaks that you can apply before adding in a loaf of sourdough bread over the course of a week. Get rid of the caffeine. I understand it's super hard to give up, but if you have 3 coffees a day, and I'm gonna try and wrap this up really quick. If you have 3 coffees a day, they're all caffeinated. Try 2 coffees with a decaf. If you add butter to that or double cream, switch it out for butter, and then have 1 caffeinated coffee, 2 decafs, and switch for ghee. Slow incremental changes until you're reduced down to just decaf with ghee. It doesn't taste that great. It's not really doing much anymore. I think I'll just get rid of that. All of a sudden, you're coffee free, you're dairy free. How do you feel? How are you functioning? How are you sleeping? Right? How's your libido, etc.? If there's still problems, remove eggs. I just also want to add that I don't think anyone's eating enough fish as what we used to eat. I think if you think about people complain about stomach acidity issues, taurine, let me think what else, zinc. These can help ramp that acidity up and get it where it needs to be. That's higher in fish. If you have electrolyte problems, we have high magnesium and taurine in fish. Magnesium is huge. Taurine is an osmolyte that will help regulate your electrolytes inside the cell, etc. This can also have a very beneficial effect. It's also higher in iodine and selenium, which is great for your thyroid function. So hopefully just that list there alone can help lots of people start to problem solve in an appropriate way. So you don't have to abandon this way of eating. You don't have to try and moderate carbohydrates, and you don't have to worry about how am I going to fare introducing some carbs if I've been a sugar addict in the past. So hopefully that really helps.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. I appreciate that, Leeds. That's one thing I see a lot too with folks that are struggling. They'll say, I've been doing this for a year now and having this problem for a year. And it's like, wait a minute, you didn't try to change anything, tweak something, adjust something? Even like you're saying, if you're just doing carnivore, maybe do lion a little bit or get rid of the coffee, or just one little change instead of just doing the same thing over and over again can oftentimes have a big impact. All right. So I know we're getting near the end of the hour, but we have some time left. I don't want to put Adam on the spot, but I wanted to chat with Adam a little bit because Adam, I know you're carnivore almost 1,000 days now, something like that.
Yep.
And you've had some issues with elevated glucose numbers, but not just the numbers, right? Like you've had some symptoms. And so you've been going down the rabbit hole a little bit and troubleshooting some things. So wanted to hear how that's going for you and your perspective.
Yeah. So I think the first thing before I do any testing, I'll probably just eat some bread.
Yeah.
I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's for sure. So basically, I've been symptomatic for roughly, I don't know, maybe a little bit more than a year, because and it seems to have coincided with once I got to my ideal body weight. I used to have like tons and tons and tons of energy, and then the energy just kind of dwindled and went away. Now, whether the weight had anything to do with it, I have no idea. If something physiologically changed inside of my body, but I definitely noticed the difference with the energy and stamina and things like that. So roughly 7 months ago, Nutrition Network came out with a course for the Keto Mojo. And I'm studying to become a Nutrition Network practitioner. So as part of that, added this additional course. And I thought, well, just for funsies, I'll go ahead and order a Keto Mojo and test it out on myself as I'm going through this course, right? And I found out that my blood glucose was high. And I thought, this seems very odd because I don't consume any carbohydrates whatsoever. So how on earth can my fasting glucose be so high? I mean, it would be as high as 115. I mean, it's not like astronomical, but it would stay in that 100 to 115 range, like every time I would check it while I was fasted. But also, to go along with that, there was no ketones. So it was 0.1 on the ketones, and that was a clue to me, that I need to dig into this a little bit more and figure out what's going on, because I should be in ketosis. Like I'm hyper, super carnivore basically. So I should have plenty of ketones production and be in ketosis, and I wasn't even close. So recently I was gifted some CGMs, and that's how I'm starting this. So to what Lee said, I want to give people something actionable that they can do. And this is something that a lot of people can purchase over the counter now as well, is purchase a CGM. So I have one of those on, and I'm using it to not change my diet initially, see how things go. And then I'm going to take out one thing. And likely the first thing is going to be the coffee to see if there's more of an effect on me than it would somebody else in relation to that glucose, because to me, it seems like my body is preferring glucose, and for some reason it's making potentially extra glucagon and glucose to run off of that instead of the ketones. For what reason, I have no idea, but I'm going to try to collect this data to figure out where I need to go with it. Hopefully it is just the coffee and I can get rid of it and my fasting glucose levels will come down. But again, that may not even be part of the problem, right? A higher glucose level could just be something that's normal for certain people on a carnivore diet. So I'm not saying that that's actually wrong or not, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to test out one thing at a time. A lot of people mention cortisol and stress and things like that could be a factor as well in creating more excess glucose through gluconeogenesis. Potentially eating excess proteins could be part of the issue too. But I'm going to wait till down the road to test that. But I'm going to try the coffee first. Then I'll probably bring my protein down a little bit and my fat up a little bit, see what happens there, and then work on meditation and not talking to people for the stress.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, my first thoughts were fat intake. So if you've lost weight and you get to a certain point, your demand for fat usually goes up because you've been eating your own fat. And then when you get to a lean, your optimal body composition, perhaps you need to increase fat. For some people, they actually need to eat more raw. Back off the cooking process and eat more raw fat. Even if it's like you cook your steak so that the fat is medium rare, you could even keep the protein going for longer. But yeah, I agree. Caffeine out first. I don't think you touch dairy, do you? Or you don't touch salt?
No, not at all. No dairy.
Ruminant meat. I would also eat like more of a nose to tail style diet. That's another thing. 50,000 years ago, this never happened, right? Ribeye eggs. We never ever did that, right? We ate the whole damn thing. We ate the cow, we ate the lamb, we ate the venison, we ate everything from the marrow, which people don't eat. Honestly, I don't see people talking about marrow that much. Super ancestrally appropriate, very high fat, great fatty acid profile. We wouldn't just have ground beef. And this is what I like about ground beef. If you eat, say, chuck, sirloin, ribeye, brisket, tongue, tail, ground beef, repeat, that's pretty great. You're getting a very nice varied sort of ratios from the ruminant animal. Heart is another great organ to eat. You can't really overeat much heart, just eat it to taste, some kidney here and there, especially if you have histamine issues. There's answers to everything. You can absolutely problem solve, and you can absolutely do this wrong. You can do anything wrong. If you're breathing out of your mouth all day long, you're breathing wrong. You know, if you're sleeping like a bat, you're sleeping wrong. You can do anything wrong. And that includes the carnivore diet, a carnivore diet. This doesn't make us zealots. You know, like we said, if you're drinking raw milk and beef jerky and pemmican, that's a carnivore diet, but I wouldn't recommend it. You're probably not going to last too long before you start having some issues, you know. And so, yeah, nose to tail, ruminant, local, get enough fat, get enough protein, take out the potential main obvious issues like caffeine, then dairy, then eggs, and then see where you lie. Another problem I just want to quickly bring up is water. Most people drink way too much water. Do you know people right now out in the wild don't drink much water at all? Can you believe that? They don't drink much water. Hardly anything at all. Why? How is that possible? Well, we derive most of our water from fat intake. We create a lot of metabolic water when we get enough fats in. Now, we weren't carrying around bottles of water and, oh, I forgot to drink water, sip, 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 sip. Plastic bottled water, minerally deficient. Absolutely not. If anything, pull back on the salt on your food and mineralize your water, glass bottled water. You know, the best way is to distill it a couple of times, mineralize it, put it out overnight, let it, you know, the sun come up and get some light information, local information to that water, and then sip water when you're thirsty. The best way, in my opinion, is, again, Coach Stephen, I get this from, is if your pee is clear, it's a waste product. It shouldn't be clear. You are now stripping and you're excreting minerals, right? What you should do is aim roughly for like a straw colored urine. You know, if it's super dark, you probably need to get the water up a bit, but you want to mineralize that water, because if you just consume water without minerals, adding something like Celtic sea salt, for example, you're not mineralizing it. It will raise blood pressure. You know, we don't really want to do that. And also, after a while, you're going to start stripping electrolytes out of your body, which is counterintuitive. If you're drinking coffee as well, that's also a diuretic, you know, and then there's the calcium and the sodium. It goes on and on and on. So there's lots of problem solving you can do on a carnivore diet. And I would recommend that everybody eats a nose to tail style. We're not talking about eating the nose. We're not talking about eating the fur. I'm talking about different cuts that you enjoy, organs that you enjoy. If you really love liver, I would probably try and moderate that to a sliver a week, you know, just a nice little cut of liver and pepper that in. But that's the way forward. You know, I think the biggest issue is we can't access blood. Blood contains salt and electrolytes. That would make it super ancestrally consistent. I don't think anyone would really have problems. And so this is where there's nuance. How much salt, how much water, how often do I eat? When do I start eating? When do I finish eating? And then there's lifestyle things as well. It's not all about diet. If you're not getting your antioxidants enough and grounding enough electrically to the earth, you know, you may be lacking. If you're not getting enough natural light, you may be lacking. If you're not blocking blue light, which I should be doing right now, and I will be doing very, very soon. I've got my perspective over there. You're going to, that also raises glucose inappropriately. Blue light. You know, there's so many factors to this. It's unbelievable. The answer is not to start taking 20 grams, 30 grams, 40 grams, 50 grams or more carbohydrates per day. Again, do whatever you want.
Great advice. I appreciate it. We could do a whole video on water and the fact that as humans, we've been able to muck up and even screw up the simplest thing in the world of water. Like, isn't it crazy? Like, how did we mess that up? But we figured out how to mess up water. It's nuts. I know we're at the end of the hour. I want to thank you guys for joining me. This has been a great conversation. I just want to go around the table real quick. Shout out your guys' YouTube channel, anything you got coming up. Adam, maybe you could go first.
Carnivore Today for me, and we will be speaking at Hack Your Health in November. So get your tickets at hackyourhealth.com, and you can get a chance to get Carrie Mann's autograph if you want.
Great. Eddie, what about you?
Yeah, I'm Edward A. Goeke, Goeke on YouTube, and I'm also present on Instagram at e.goeke_. Those are really my two major platforms. I'm active on YouTube at the moment every single day, and also I've mentioned my book a few times, which is something that basically, if anyone wants to know how I think, how I've arrived at my conclusions, and also my effectively all the relevant details of my story as to how I arrived at this at the time that I have, that is contraindicated, and it is on Amazon, in paperback, hardcover, ebook, audio, basically every single version that you can think of in all platforms that you can think of, like Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, Google Play Books, all of that. So
I love it, and I love it, and I vouch for it. It's a great book. I had Eddie on the channel a while back. It's awesome. So highly recommend.
If anyone hasn't read it yet,
get it. And
some
Lee,
people have, some people haven't.
And Lee,
yeah, I'm exclusively on YouTube, so come find me at Kent Carnivore. I talk a lot about my story, the issues with fiber and gut health, etc. Yeah, see you over there. I'm currently working on. I'm taking it very slow because I've got to be very careful about how I make this video. But the whole premise is how veganism is actually far more harmful than carnivore, especially if you're eating a lion diet, a ruminant meat-based diet locally. I'm stumbling across some incredible facts and statistics. It's opened my eyes, actually. So.
Looking forward to that.
Cool.
And for those of you that don't know, Lee is also a movie star. I don't know if Lee knows this or not yet, but Lee's in our documentary. Lee, my wife and I own our little small town movie theater, and we've been playing the Healing Humanity trailer there. And this was on Sunday. I was just walking by. I'm like, oh, there's my buddy Lee Kopis there on the big screen. So before every
I haven't
movie,
changed since. I don't watch. I just, just hanging around.
right? Before every movie at Montello Theater, they see Lee Kopis on the big screen. So if you guys want to see our trailer, you can visit healinghumanity.movie. We have both of the trailers up there. We are finishing editing as we speak through the end of the year, and the documentary is going to be ready early next year. So thank you guys all for joining us. Thank you, Lee, Eddie, Adam, and thank you everyone for your questions. We really appreciate it. Have a great day. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Kerry. Good talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
Yep.